Hey everyone, it's Ryan, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Bethless today for this episode, and we're going to talk. And hopefully, you'll still watch, but we are going to talk about the sales for the month of November. Just a bit of shameless plug here. You can also get this same written version on our website at bethandryan.ca, and we have the #1 ranking Guelph Real Estate podcast because we're probably the only, as far as I know, Guelph Real Estate podcast. We publish that every 2 weeks. We've had over 500 downloads so far and lots of great feedback. So it's an audio version of what we're talking about today. And it's for those who are making dinner and listening to something or in your car. And usually the episodes are about 10 to 15 minutes. So you can find those on Apple and Spotify. And so we've got you covered with print, online, video, and audio. So there's no excuse. You have to be listening to something. Okay, enough of the self-promotion. Let's get into what you're here for, which are the November sales. And in November, you would anticipate that it is going to be slower than the spring. And you're right, because on average throughout the whole year, we sell 5 houses per day in Guelph. In the spring, you're oftentimes higher than that, 5-something, 6 houses a day. And after July, it goes down. So November this year, no surprise, it was 4 houses a day. It's average, nothing to be worried about. It was less than last year. It was a strong November last year, but it was also greater than 2023 and 2022. So overall, nothing really unusual happened in November. It is the time of year when people start canceling listings, and we did start to see that. Mid-November, we had 505 houses on the market. By the time we're recording this in early December, we're down to 452. And so that's a 10% decrease. And it's in both segments, both the condo segment and the detached segment, but there were more cancellations in the detached segment than there were in condos. Just to give a bit of context, it's probably likely we're going to roll into 2026 with 400 or so houses on the market. Just as people start to cancel them through December and more things do sell, we'll probably end up at about 400. Just for context, in 2022, in January, when the prices hit an all-time high in many areas, not just Guelph, in Guelph we had there was a week where it was about 50 houses available. And so we are getting into January 2026 at 400, an 8-fold increase in inventory. So anybody who is telling you that prices are going to skyrocket is not aware of the formula that makes houses skyrocket in price. It's low supply, and we have ample supply in Guelph real estate. So keep that in mind. We are sitting in a balanced market, and that is calculated by months of inventory, MOI. And it's a relatively simple formula. You take the last 3 months average sales, and you divide that by the current available inventory, which will give you a number. And if it's less than 2, we're in a seller's market. And if it is 2 to 6, we're in a balanced market. And 6+, we are in a buyer's market. And so this number means that at the current trends of the last 3 months, how many months would it take for the current inventory to sell through in its entirety? And right now in Guelph, we're sitting at about 3.25. So that is between 2 and 6, obviously. So that means we are in a balanced market. It's a bit low, simply because some sellers have taken their house off the market. So we should see that bounce back. At 3.25, we're on the seller balanced to seller's market side of balanced. And I think that we're going to move closer to the other end of inventory once the new year comes around. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. There were 125 sales in Guelph that happened in November, of which 93 were detached houses. That's one segment. And the other segment is condos, or anything with a fee. And 93 detached and 32 condo sales. In the condo segment, $330,000 condo on Conroy was the low price, and a $1.49 million, it's like a condo townhouse on Manor Park. They're executive. They're awesome. It's an executive development there at the end of Manor Park, and it's pretty cool. Those are the sales range for the month of November. The average was 578,000. We've been watching this pretty closely because the average was just above 600,000 earlier in the year. Then it fell just below, and we've been watching it slowly trickle down. The interesting thing to note here is because it is an average price, it is influenced obviously by significant swings. So that if you take out that Manor Park sale at 1.49 million, the average price was actually 548,000. So it is starting to trickle lower. Again, we'll talk about it in a few minutes for next year, but I think it's actually going to get even lower. None of the units of the 32 sold over the asking, 6 sold at the asking, and the remaining 26 sold under the asking. And again, you can find all of this and a little more detail on our blog. But what is really interesting here, I think this is actually kind of crazy. But if you take a look at the condo segment, and I'll get into it again in a few minutes, but if you take a look at this segment, I've been talking about for a little while now how the inventory continues to rise. We are actually at +1 more units for sale, listed for sale now than we had in July. So we're actually increasing as the year moves on. And in July, they were selling an average of 1.6 per day. Now, as of the end of November, we sold 32 in 30 days. So we're just over 1 per day. So more units for sale after 6 months and selling less on average per day. A very interesting note here is that if you take a look at who lives in these condos that are for sale, 44% of them on the market right now are vacant, as in the owner, whether they've moved on to their new home because they couldn't sell their condo in time, whether they're an investor who didn't want to re-rent it to students, whether they are, who knows what they're doing, but they're not living there. And that person is probably paying a mortgage. They're probably paying condo fees. They're probably paying utilities. If you were out buying something right now, I would suggest you take a look at a condo. Will it get better? I think it might, but it's pretty darn good now. It's been looking this way. Anybody who bought a condo with us this year has benefited from this. It's impossible for me to say where it's going to stop the decline, but it's looking better than it has been. Okay, moving on to the detached segment, there were 93 units that sold here. The low was in the Ward, just outside of downtown on the east side, sold for 530,000, and 1.55 million was the high in Clearfields at South Guelph, and I think that was on Zadig. The overall average here was 794,000, which is lower than we've seen in a little while. It's the first time it's crossed below 800,000 in a little while. And of course, this average price is influenced by the mix of houses that sell. And historically in Guelph, 15% to 20% of the houses that sell every month are over $1 million. It falls within that range statistically more often than not. As an example, October was 17, pretty much right in the middle. November was 7%. Way outside the range. And of course, with only 7% selling over $1 million, the average comes down. And so that's why we saw the average come down. It's one of the reasons we saw the average come down in November. So it's worth keeping an eye on that one as well. 8 of the 93 sold over the asking. And this is not because there's a surge in buyers. This is because the strategy that the listing agent or the seller took was to list the house below market value to try to get some sort of competition going, and then ultimately sell over the asking price, which really is the market value anyways. It's just a different way to get there. So it's a bit deceiving when they sold over the asking. That's 9% of them did, but it's not really due to buyer demand. 5 sold at the asking price, and the remaining 86%, or 80 of the 93, sold under the asking price. So by the end of November, so far year to date, we are -6% in total sales. We are -5.3% in the actual number of houses that sold. So physical units sold, -5%. It's about 90 to 100 units. And the average price has declined -1%. So the average price, despite the fact that there are less units selling, the average price is holding, or the mix of homes that are selling are still sort of tight to the range that they were last year, which is just below 800,000. That's all types of homes. Buyers obviously are still testing the waters to see if there are deals to be had, and in some cases there are, depending on what it is that's being sold. Sellers are, in some cases, adjusting their expectations to the current market. In other situations, sellers are saying, I don't like the way this is going right now. I'm going to hedge my bets that in the spring, there's going to be more buyers out, which there will be, but there will also be more sellers out at the same time. So this works well if you have a unique home in that it's priced a little bit higher, or it's in an area that doesn't have homes come up very often, or it's just unique. Those types of homes do well in a spring market when there are a lot of buyers, because there could be more buyers for them when in a market like we are in right now, there are very few buyers of a product like that. I don't think that buyers are going to come back in full force next year. I think there are going to be more transactions next year, but I don't think that it's going to translate to higher prices. And in fact, that was part of our 2026 prediction, was that we do anticipate buyers are going to come back. We do anticipate that first-time buyers are going to come off the sidelines now that interest rates have come down a full % in a one-year period. We do anticipate that as a result of a lot of people's cheap mortgages coming up for renewal, that they are going to make some decisions about moving, whether they're going to upsize, downsize, move out of city, province, whatever. They're going to be more active than we've seen them in the past number of years. And so we anticipate that the overall number of houses that are going to sell are going to be 3 to 5% higher. However, we do believe that the overall average price is going to come down 1 to 3%. Those first-time buyers, when they come into the market, they're not buying a house over $1 million typically. So if there is going to be an increase in first-time buyers, they are going to buy the lower-priced inventory. More transactions on lower-priced inventory means a lower average price. So we anticipate that that's probably going to happen. So keep an eye out. We will probably update again in another month with the year-end results, but I suspect that we're going to have an unusual year next year in that there will be more activity, but it will be more buyers and more sellers and more negotiation as the two sides start to try to work out what prices are going to be like into next year. So keep an eye out for that. And if you do have any questions on the Guelph real estate market, of course, you can find us on our website at bethandryan.ca, and we'll talk to you soon.